Oh my god, we are finally here, guys. After over 200 movies and many months of waiting for this video and me announcing that was happening, we have finally arrived at the best movies of 2021. I know this video has been delayed a lot. I know you guys have, waited very patiently for this, and I do apologize for taking so long to get this video out, but you know what? It kind of hit me that last year there were quite a few movies that I could have seen that I just didn't, because I was so anxious to get the 2020 video out as soon as possible. I had to get it out by 2020 and things I had to get it out before 2020 and things like that. And as a result, there were movies like The Father, for example, which is now my favorite movie of 2020, wasn't even on the list. So it's kind of not as accurate of a video in terms of rankings and things like that, which, that can always change year by year. But this year, I really told myself I don't want to get this done until I've seen certain movies. So, things like Cyrano, Drive My Car, movies that I've already, thankfully was able to review. I really wanted to wait until I saw those movies to really get this out, thinking that there could be they could potentially qualify for this best list. They could potentially make an appearance on this list, and that's why it took me so long to get this done. We'll say moving forward, I'm probably not going to take this long to do a best list again, because we're kind of at a point where it's cool that this is out, but it's not quite as relevant as it maybe would have been a couple months ago. But regardless, I don't really want to delay this any further. We're just going to go ahead and get into this. Now, before I do want to say just a couple of disclaimers that I say every single year, so I probably am going to sound fairly redundant here. This is my list, and I will say that right off the bat. This is not in any way an objective list of these are the best movies of 2021. Everyone knows these are the best movies of 2021, so there are going to be some movies on here that maybe you disagree with, that you think maybe shouldn't be here, or there are movies that you think should be here that either I didn't watch or maybe I just didn't really feel the same way about that you do, and that's fine. Movies are very subjective. I always love, discourse and things like that. I love getting to, go back and I really like getting to talk about people, why they feel certain ways about movies that I didn't and things like that. I think the conversation is always just very interesting to me, and I think it's very good to, I think it's very good to push, a more healthier sort of way of viewing movies. I've seen a lot of hostility recently, and so I think it's very important to just get that right out of the way. And also, there are still, while I did take the time to watch a lot more than I have in other years, there are still going to be some on here that I just did not get a chance to see, so that also could be a big reason why it's not on here. But either way, we're going to go ahead, starting off with my honorable mentions, which there are quite a few here, because I think 2021 actually turned out to be a fairly solid year for movies. There were a lot of films that came out that I very much did enjoy, so we do have quite a few honorable mentions here. Starting off with Bergman Island, Shiva Baby, Riders of Justice, easily one of the most overlooked films of last year. Really wish that film got a lot more love and hype behind it. Val, Coda, The Last Duel, The Lost Daughter, Encanto, Last Night in Soho, King Richard, Malcolm and Marie, Raya and the Last Dragon, Adrian, Fear Street, only part 3. Part 1 is great, part 2 I liked, but part 3 is really the only one that I enjoyed the most and would have ended up qualifying on this list. The Worst Person in the World, Billie Eilish, The World's a Little Blurry, Zack Snyder's Justice League, and then these last 3 came so close to making this list. They were on this list so many, for a while, and then other movies just bumped it off. West Side Story, Don't Look Up, and Flea. So those are my honorable mentions. We're going to go ahead. So I am going to do a top 20. If you guys can't tell, I am going to do a top 20 because I watched a lot of movies, and there's some movies that I just don't want to exclude, and I think that I'll just be able to, I'll be more satisfied with a top 20 than a top 15 or top 10. So we're going to go ahead and start off with my number 20. I I know what you're going to say. Judas and the Black Messiah came out very early last year, so some people might not even consider it a 2021 film, but I very much do. I don't really care what year this qualifies in terms of like Oscars and things like that. This movie did not get a theatrical release until 2021, so to me this is very much a 2021 film, and that's how I'm categorizing a lot of this list, by the way. I wanted to start off by saying that, but Judas and the Black Messiah was just such a incredible film. It did so many amazing things, whether it be really shedding light on the Black Panthers and the really sort of good efforts that they made to try to improve their community, kind of show them in a more positive light than the way that they've been portrayed, you know, within history and things like that, but also showing how much they were consistently demonized by the public and how this really kind of put them, you know, in this bad position. There's so much good work that the Black Panthers could have done, and I think Judas and the Black Messiah really does shed a lot of light on that. Daniel Kaluuya giving, I think, the performance of his career here, just so ferocious and just so charismatic in what he's able to do in this film. Fred Hampton, just the passion that he had, you know, for trying to improve lives for Black Americans and things like that, you know, give them certain opportunities that they weren't given. I think he just does such an amazing job throughout this entire film. Lakeith Stanfield as well, so happy that he also ended up getting a nomination for this film, because I think he gave a really strong performance. It was every bit as heartbreaking as it really needed to be. The ending especially was such an emotional gut punch, but it was also just so riveting to watch, seeing these two men go down very different paths in life and kind of paralleling them in a very interesting way. I mean, Jesse Plemons, Michael Sheen, so many amazing performances throughout this entire movie. Dominic Fishback also was incredible here. Judas and the Black Messiah really was kind of everything I needed it to be. I feel like it's a film that a lot of people have kind of forgotten about because it came out very early, but its impact and just how well crafted it is very much should not be forgotten. It's a very special film, and I'm very happy that it was able to be made. Very much one of my favorites of 2021. A Quiet Place Part 2 was a movie that I was honestly kind of dubious about when it was first announced. I just felt like A Quiet Place was a really good, you know, sort of standalone horror movie. It did a really good job of not feeling too gimmicky, finding a way to make such a premise work, and I really didn't feel like we needed to continue in any way, but A Quiet Place Part 2 proved me wrong in virtually every single aspect. What we're able to get with this film is a more fleshed out version of what we got in the first movie, because we are going beyond just the confines of the Abbott family. You know, we're able to get a much better look at what's really happened to this world, kind of contrasting it with what it used to be, with such an amazing opening sequence, which is one of the best of all of last year. I mean, just so well crafted in that way. Emily Blunt is still really good here, even though she's kind of pushed to the side. Millicent Simmons, though, really does come into her own in this movie and really shows that she can carry a film very well here as Regan, who goes through such an interesting sort of development in this film. The film's also a lot more hopeful than I think people were really expecting, and it ended in such a way to where I think I am okay with the idea of this becoming a franchise now. I know that John Krasinski has announced there's going to be a third and maybe a fourth, and as long as he's at the helm and as long as they're able to be as consistent as these two films are, bring it on, because I think this could potentially become one of the best horror franchises out there. Quiet Place Part 2 very much being one of the best horror sequels that I've seen, I think, really ever, and also just being one of the most thrilling and unnerving films, but also one of the most hopeful films of 2021 overall. Leave it to Phil Lord and Chris Miller to continuously make such imaginative and such incredible animated films. Mitchells vs. the Machines is a film that it is a damn shame right off the bat was not able to get a proper theatrical release, because it really would have been something special, I think, getting to see this film on the big screen. But the fact that we were able to get it in general, I think, is very much worth it. The way this film is able to have such a sense of energy to it and understand understand, technology so well, but never making it feel too gimmicky, never making it feel like it is trying to, it is trying to, knock you over the head with, its technological metaphors and things like that. It all just feels so natural in that way. I think the social commentary is so good in this movie, but underneath all of that is this heartwarming story about the importance of family and them trying to stay connected and relying on each other, and how they need to depend on each other and things like that, especially between a father and a daughter, sort of them learning to sort of accept each other. It's honestly really heartwarming to watch, and Abby Jacobson and especially Danny McBride are so good in this movie. I loved the entire cast here. I think that Michael Ryanda's vision of this film was so well done, and once again, it's just another knockout hit from Phil Lord and Chris Miller. I think there were a lot of really great animated films that came out last year, but for me, if I was the Academy, this is the one that absolutely should win Best Animated Feature. It's the one that impacted me the most. It was hilarious to watch, and it had such a good emotional gut punch at the end, and also such a great message. I really just think this is a film that is deemed to be a classic. It really does show just how consistent Phil Lord and Christopher Miller really are. They took a concept that I think could have been relatively generic and maybe tiresome, and they really did make it feel fresh and exciting, and I think that alone very much does give it a spot on this list. This was one of the best years for musicals that I think I've seen in years. There were so many incredible films that came out throughout the year that not only did such a great job of, really paying tribute to musicals, but also finding ways to adapt these classic stories in fun and interesting ways. But you look at something like Tick, Tick, Boom, which is not a relatively known story. It's one that I think definitely does have a fan base, but it doesn't have the fan base that some of the other musical adaptations did. And leave it to Lin-Manuel Miranda to really just find a way to make this story work in such an interesting way, telling this story that is so inspiring about Jonathan Larson and how much he strived to become a writer, even when he was at his lowest point. Writing is something that matters so much to him. He structures his entire life around it. I think the movie just did such an incredible job with that. And for me, was very inspiring to watch. I think anyone who's ever been a creator, I think this film will very much I think very much will scratch that sort of, creative itch that they might have had. I think it does such an incredible job with that. But also, my God, the performances here. Andrew Garfield maybe giving the best performance of his entire career, just completely transforming into Jonathan Larson, showing the passion that he really did have. But again, also just how broken he almost felt, and how, virtually every single aspect of his life was kind of slipping away because he was losing that passion for writing. I think was just so well crafted here, but also getting to show a different side of himself with his singing ability, which I don't think anyone really knew that he had. The way he was able to train himself to sing and play the piano, a fucking madness, honestly. I still don't know to this day how he was able to do it. Such incredible musical sequences here, and so well edited too, in terms of just how chaotic it is, and really feeling like this sort of stage experience, and really kind of putting you into the head of Jonathan Larson in a very interesting way. Tick, Tick, Boom was a love letter for musical lovers, and I think very much does work with that, but it also is a film for creatives alike, and for me, it is one of the most inspiring films of last year, and the second I saw it, I knew that it would somehow end up on this list, and especially for musical fans, so many fun little references to, musical films and things like that. Tick, Tick, Boom really was just kind of everything I needed to be, and by far one of the best musicals of 2021. Spencer was a film I know that divided a lot of people, and that's understandable why, because it's very unconventional for biopic standards. This is not a film that tries to portray things in a very squeaky clean way. If anything, it shows just how torturous and sort of frightening the royal stature can really be, kind of comparing it more to a state of imprisonment than anything. Really just doing a great job of just showing the negative experience that Diana Spencer really kind of undergoed here. Someone that really never wanted to be a part of this royal stature, was sort of just kind of forced into that role. Really, I think just does such a great job of that. The choice to make this more of a psychological thriller, I think, was a very bold one, but I think very much did pay off because it feels the most accurate to what she really did go through within that experience, but also kind of showcasing the life that I think she really would have wanted to have. Someone that is so regretful of the choices she's made and wants to do everything she can to get herself out of there, to protect herself, to protect her kids. I think this movie just does such an incredible job with that, but also Pablo Larraín's directing to this film is just so interesting to behold. I mean, I've seen him direct, I think that what he was able to do, with conveying the film in the way he was, his style, I know isn't going to work for everyone, but I think he really just did a great job of showing the almost horrific approach that he really does go for here. The entire movie has like this sort of tinge of, somberness to it and things like that, and I think all of that was amazingly well done. But my God, I mean, Kristen Stewart just should be the front runner. Like, let's get that out of the way right now. She absolutely should be the front runner for Best Actress right now. Really just giving such a transformative, but also such a, I think emotional performance as Diana Spencer, capturing all the subtleties and nuances of what this character has really been through. You get the sense that, she just wants to be a normal person. She doesn't really want this royal stature. She wants to be able to go to McDonald's. She wants to be able to, listen to certain types of music and things like that. And Stewart just does such an amazing job embodying this character that you really just find yourself falling in love with. And really, I think just being just such a brilliant love letter to Princess Diana overall. This really, I think, is the film that she would have wanted. This is something that she always hoped for, but also I think like a painful realization of the constant terrors that she really did face. It's so unorthodox, but I think that's what makes this film so intoxicating in that way. It's a movie that I really have not been able to stop thinking about since it came out. Like I said, I know it wasn't for everyone, but for me, this is a film that very much deeply impacted me. I love the choices that it makes, and I think that alone makes it just one of the best of the entire year. I knew coming out of this would be a film that I just have not been able to stop thinking about this film since I first saw it. I think it's just boldness and audacious sort of vision is really what makes it so unique and really makes it a clear contender for one of the best films of 2021. No Time to Die is the kind of finale that I think a lot of action franchises really wish that it could have had, but also the Bond film that we've really never been able to get. I mean, there's a genuine sense of finality throughout this entire film that I don't think we've ever gotten to see in other Bond tenures because they just weren't able to get it, and it kind of makes you wonder what could have happened if, like, Sean Connery or Pierce Brosnan or hell, even Roger Moore was able to get this kind of send-off. Would it be as satisfying? Would it be as emotional of a conclusion as this film is? And my God, Daniel Craig really just going all in to really just show us just how complex his Bond has always been. Someone who is so much more humanistic, so regretful of the choices that he's made. It's so interesting to have watched this character, how much he has evolved from Casino Royale. I know a lot of people have not been a fan of the more sort of serialized storytelling, but that's something that I've always felt compelled by. I love how much this film has gone into the history, has shown this sort of aging Bond in this way. I think it's just done such an amazing job with that. Léa Seydoux as well, really just doing a great job to get you more on board with this relationship and really just finding a way to make us fall in love with the relationship at the heart of this story overall, and ending in a way that still has me so shocked that they decided to wrap it up in the way that they did. No Time to Die, so many amazing, action sequences here, such a spectacle of a film. It really is just I think easily one of the best Bond films that we've ever had. Cycling through all of the Bond films prior to this movie really did pay off. It was one of the first films that ended up getting delayed, but thankfully it very much did end up delivering. It very much was worth the wait, and I think is an easy contender for one of the best Bond films that we've ever had to date. Red Rocket for me may just be a contender for the funniest movie of the entire year. I mean, this film is just absolutely outrageous with the places that it ends up going, but it also is one of, I think, the most interesting character studies of the entire year. A lot of people compared this to Uncut Gems, and I think that's a very interesting comparison, but I also think it's completely different from that movie because where Howard Ratner always had something that you could latch onto as a character, and someone that, seemingly had good intentions. Mikey Saber really has none of them. This is a guy that is so manipulative, constantly likes to monopolize the conversation around himself and how great he was, but also not being able to come to the realization that he himself is pathetic. He is very much past his heyday as a porn star. People in this town don't take him seriously because of that. It's so interesting to watch this character and how he navigates life. And Simon Rex was just the perfect find, I think, for this role. You would have never expected him, the Scary Movie 3 guy, to take on a film like this, but really just kind of shows a talent that I don't think we knew he really had in him. I mean, the way his character is so inviting, you kind of forget about his sort of deceptive nature, but as the movie goes on, they really do make it abundantly clear to just show the true motives that this character really does have, but still finding a way to keep it so fun and sort of, it's so fun and riveting throughout. I think it's just a really I think it was a really steep tightrope, and I think that Sean Bakers did such an amazing job when it came to this movie, the way he was able to balance everything. Strawberry also being such a compelling character, Susanna Sun giving such a great breakthrough performance here, and also mainly working with a collection of non-actors, I think really just made this film feel so much more naturalistic in that way. It goes in some really fucked up directions at points, stuff that can be very icky for a lot of people, but I think it very much did what it needed to do. I think it was one of the most interesting character studies of the entire year, and an ending that is just so chilling to think about, and one that I've just not been able to stop wrapping my head around to this very day since I've saw it. Red Rocket is just such a riveting film, had me on the edge of my seat throughout, but also had me absolutely in stitches, and the way it was able to balance everything, that alone I think makes it an easy pick for this list. It honestly is a shame that not a lot of people have seen 9 Days, because I feel like this was a movie that was raved about coming out of Sundance and things like that back in 2020. Everyone was talking about how great this film was going to be, how much it was going to take the world by storm. But, Sony Pictures Classics got a hold of it, really did not give it the proper, I think, release or sort of, marketing that it really did deserve. And as a result, it was quickly forgotten about. But it's really unfortunate because this is such a special film and has so much to say, I think, about the afterlife, but also the before the afterlife, and kind of, doing what you can to make sure the choices that you make in life are the choices that matter, and kind of questioning a lot of the paths that you have taken, but also being such an interesting character study of this man that has such a specific worldview on things. He's kind of taken emotion out of the equation entirely, and how that is kind of challenged by recent events that have happened. Winston Duke was just so phenomenal throughout this entire film. He is very stilted at points, but it's such a magnificent performance when you start to see that exterior sort of, let loose, and start to see a lot more of his emotions on display. Really just kills it throughout this entire film. I think what this movie has to say about memory and time and things like that, it's really going to get to a lot of people. The ending is one that really just made me feels so good coming out of it, and it's such a humanistic film in that way. I don't really want to get into much more than that, but such amazing cinematography as well, such great world building here. 9 Days is just such a special movie that I really wish more people were able to see. I hope one day it's able to get that cult following, but for now it remains to be, I think, one of the most overlooked films of last year. Maybe, actually, no, it's not the most overlooked film of last year. That's for a little bit later, but it's certainly one of the most overlooked. But it does not take away from the fact that it's easily one of my favorites of 2021, for sure. It's very rare that concert movies are able to win me over in the way that Summer of Soul really did, and I think that's a testament to just how good this film really is. I mean, what I think Summer of Soul does so well in this film is not just talk about the event and how great it was, and, showcase how special of an event this was for Black people to come together and sort of forget about a lot of the troubling things that have been happening, throughout throughout their lives and kind of just have this more, sort of lively communal experience, but also really get us to be a part of it, show why this concert was so special, this concert that seemingly has been forgotten about, really showcase the importance of it. I think Summer of Soul just does that so incredibly well, seeing the passion that everyone had for this event, and Questlove himself, really displaying just how important of an event this was in history, and how this should be remembered just as much as Woodstock. I think is just something that is really going to hit people in a very profound manner, and it definitely has already, but I think the more people become aware of this event, I think it's really great that this film was able to get a lot more recognition. It was able to, make this whole event feel a lot more, widespread in that way. I think it's really amazing the way they're able to do that, and it's really great to see that this film has gotten a Best Documentary feature nomination, because just from the film alone, hopefully it will be remembered a lot more than the concert itself, which I think is just as important, showing the impact that it had on everyone. I think the Harlem Culture Festival, it's one that should very much be remembered, and I hope that Summer of Soul is remembered even more fondly, just as fondly as that concert was, but hopefully is able to be remembered a lot more than that concert was. This is just such a special documentary. It looks like just a regular concert film, but it's so much more than that, and really it's just a film you kind of have to see to fully understand it. But I think it's easily the best documentary of last year. It's definitely the one that had the most impact on me. The way it ends, especially just seeing how much people are just so enamored by remembrance of it alone, and how much they hold it to such a high standard, such fond memories. It just is really just infectious to watch, but also just seeing the passion that everyone had, throughout this concert, how they never really have let go of that. It's just really incredible to watch, and I think that alone makes it easily the best documentary of last year, and an easy and I think that alone is really what made this film impact me in the way that did. It's not the kind of movie I'd normally put on my best list. Like I said, concert movies are not usually my thing, but this one really did hit me in a very big way, and I'm very happy to see that it's very much has gotten the following that it does deserve. I honestly think we've really taken for granted just how amazing it is that a film like The Suicide Squad was able to exist in the way that it was. When you look at the previous entry and just how much of a disaster that film was financially for a lot of people think that's one of the worst comic book films ever made. I wouldn't go that far, but it's certainly not anything special. The fact that we were able to get a complete 180 with James Gunn, someone who does have full control throughout his entire movie, is able to go in the weird and often fucked up directions that he really wants to take this story in. It's just really incredible to behold here. He really kind of holds nothing back when it comes to this movie, showcasing these characters at these extremes and just how far they're willing to go. It's such a brutal movie in that way in terms of gore. Just the opening sequence alone really just shows again, just how willing Gunn is to go to the places that he is in this movie, how expendable some of these characters are. He just does such an amazing job of that, but also the way he's able to get us attached to all of these characters, so when they eventually are in these situations, when their lives are on the line, we are that much more invested. I think that's something that Gunn has always done such an amazing job with, and he really just showcases just how great of a director he can be when he really is able to let loose. And I've always loved, the Guardians films and things like that, but I think this movie might be even better than both of those, just again because Gunn does have full control throughout this. He doesn't have to worry about, setting up franchise and things like that. He really can do whatever he wants with this movie, and I think the fact that he was able to just kind of play around with everything, I think makes it a lot better. I mean, so many amazing standouts throughout this film. Idris Elba, John Cena giving a performance that I never would have expected him to give, and really carrying over into Peacemaker, which you guys know how I feel about that that incredible show overall. Joel Kinnaman getting a lot more to do this time around. Sylvester Stallone being amazing as King Shark. Viola Davis really getting to show the more sort of cutthroat and sociopathic side of Amanda Waller. Really just gets the most mileage out of all of these characters. And of course, Margot Robbie playing the most fleshed out version of Harley Quinn we have seen to date. I think the cast was just amazing here. Action sequence wise, I think this film just really did deliver for me. And it is one of those movies where the more I think about it, the more I really do love it. I do think this is a film that is going to be fondly remembered for a lot of people. I think it is the best DCU film to date, and it really is a shame that this film did underperform in the way that it did, because I think there's so much more that we can do when it comes to these characters, and I hope things like Peacemaker and things like that are able to continue to flesh out this world more, are able to show more exciting things that we can do with this character. As long as Gunn is in control, I will very much be on board, and I'm just very happy a film like this was very much able to exist. It was funny, it was outrageous, it was even emotional in some aspects, especially with Ratcatcher. I mean, such an interesting sort of dynamic to throw in the mix. Someone who, you know, while everyone else is so morally gray, she really is like the most wholesome out of all of them. Just so many interesting dynamics throughout this entire film, so many different emotions this film made me feel, and just, again, the fact it was able to exist alone, that's what really makes me so impressed by this film, and I think very much makes it one of the best comic book movies of last year. It's not the best comic book movie of 2021, we will get to that, but it is a very strong contender for one of the best for sure, and easily the best I think the DCU has had to offer yet. You know, they say these days it's very hard for, like, an original film to exist, but I can't think of a movie that I've ever seen that is quite like Titan before. I mean, this movie is just honestly beyond comprehension with the directions that it really does take, and I mean that in the best way possible. This film, for, I want to say, the first half is a straight up like body horror. It is absolutely insane. It is so relentless in the way it goes about things. There's an action scene in the beginning that is both hilarious but also just crazy to watch. Our lead character has such an interesting way of looking at life and things like that, and then the film eventually transitions into something that is a lot different. It becomes a lot more heartwarming in that way, and the fact that they were able to balance everything in such a seamless way, I think really is emblematic of just how incredible this film really is. Julie Ducournau's directing here is amazing here. Her attention to detail, but also just the themes that she's trying to pursue are so much more profound than you would expect from a movie like this. On paper, this movie seems like one that would be just something that you would not be able to take seriously, would seem so stupid and almost like a B movie, but this movie really is kind of anything but that. This really is a film that dives into topics like gender, humanity, remorse, but especially the idea of love. I think is just so interesting the way this film decides to go about it. It's graphic and fucked up one minute, and then it is heartwarming and tender the next, and I really can't say much more than that, because there's still not a lot of people that have seen this movie, and it's unfortunate because I think this is absolutely one of the must-sees of last year for sure. The fact that Agatha Roselle has not gotten any award attention whatsoever, I think is an absolute shame, because I think she gives such a incredible performance here. There's so much that's resting on her shoulders here, but she does it in such a nuanced and subtle manner that I really would not have expected. It's such a challenging performance, but she really rises to the occasion here. Vincent Linden also being incredible. I get why the film didn't get a lot of like awards and things like that, but the fact that it was completely shut out of like best international film, I think is a real crime here. This is just such a original and just such an interesting film that the more I think about it, the more I'm just deeply fascinated that it really does exist. There's so many ideas here that just work so incredible. It's a film that I think is best to go in knowing so little, but really is such a rewarding experience. It's certainly not going to be for everyone. I know some people that absolutely despise this movie, but for me, this is a film that just impacted me in such a big way. I was so taken aback by the risks that it took, but also was so enamored at the same time with said risks and the places that it was willing to go, and the fact that they were able to pull everything off as well as they were. and get the message across that they were fully trying to convey, that's what really makes this film so special. It's one of those movies that just really reminds you what the power of cinema can really do. That's why this film hit me so much, and that's why it's easily one of the best films of 2021. Come On seemingly is a film that you have seen before, where you have this adult and this kid and them sort of, understanding each other and kind of like healing through, their different types of, issues and things like that, and different sort of traumas that they've undergone in life. But it is so much different than you really are expecting. I mean, for one, this is a movie where the kid is really kind of teaching the adult in that way. Joaquin Phoenix's character, this is someone that is having such a hard time letting out his emotions. There's so much that's like bottled up inside of him that he doesn't really want to talk about, and the way that Woody Norman's character, really kind of finds a way to get him to let out those emotions. I mean, that alone is what makes this film, I think, so special. I love the sort of role reversal in that way, but it's also what this film has to say, I think, about emotions and things like that I think are so well done in this movie. And Joaquin Phoenix just gives such a amazing performance here. It is very subtle, much less showy than what you have seen before, but no less just a fantastic performance that just continues to show why he's one of the best. But Woody Norman almost finds a way to top him in this movie, almost finds a way to surpass the work that Phoenix does here, giving one of the best trial performances that I have seen in so long. I really wish that he was getting the recognition that he deserved. I think he most definitely deserved a Best Supporting Actor nomination, and the fact that he didn't is a real shame here. But also such interesting direction here from Mike Mills, who really does take the time to focus on these issues in such a interesting way. It goes far beyond just like a road trip movie. It's a lot more than that, especially when the other half of this movie is practically a documentary where you have Joaquin Phoenix and him interviewing these kids and kind of asking them these very sort of philosophical questions, which kind of ties the film to the themes of the movie together in such a beautiful bow in that way. That's the stuff that has really stuck with me, those often being some of the best scenes in this movie. The black and white cinematography really kind of showcasing the morally gray areas that this film is trying to go for. Come On is just such a incredible film that I think is going to touch a lot of people. It's another film that I think was very much overlooked last year, but it's definitely one of my favorites of 2021. I think it should be getting a lot more recognition. It's such a special film, and if you weren't able to see it, I mean, you need to check it out as soon as possible. You definitely are doing yourself a great injustice in not seeing this movie. It's definitely one of the most emotional, but also I think one of the most rewarding experiences of last year for sure. Dune is one of those movies that you go into and you have such high expectations already. There's so much that is riding on this film. Everyone said that it's going to be, the next sci-fi epic. It's coming off the heels of Blade Runner 2049, which arguably is Denis Villeneuve's best film. And yet you watch this movie and it's somehow able to surpass those expectations that you really do have. Not only does this film deliver entirely on spectacle in terms of production design, which is without a doubt some of the best I have ever seen. I still have no idea how they were able to construct this movie in the way they did, much of which was done with the use of practical effects. A lot of this was not with CGI. I think it's just absolutely incredible in this movie. The look and feel of everything, it just looks so naturalistic in that way. There's never a point in this film where it doesn't look tangible, and I think that alone is what really makes this film so jaw-dropping. But also the performances that we were able to get from this movie. Timothée Chalamet maybe giving the best performance, I think, of his career yet, playing a character that is so deeply conflicted, has so many different paths that he can go down, and this film really just does such a great job of setting all of that up. But also Rebecca Ferguson playing this mom that is so devoted to her son, but also is very much blaming herself for a lot of the darkness that is going on within his life. Those two kind of anchoring the movie, the relationship you really end up latching onto in this film. I think they do a really incredible job with that. I've heard a lot of people say, oh, this movie's just a lot of setup, it's kind of incomplete, but that's kind of the point. This movie wants to present everything to you, and I think the fact that this is just a lot of setup, I think that's what makes it so interesting in that way, because there's no part of this movie where it feels like that is all this movie is. There's never a point where it feels like we're only focusing on this specific area because we need to set something up. Everything just feels so well fleshed out. We get an idea of what everyone's going through, and really ending things in a way that makes me so happy that we are getting that part 2. If this movie were to end in the way that it did, I honestly still would feel satisfied, but obviously I would hope, I would still think about what could have been, and thankfully we are going to see what could have been, because Villeneuve has been able to greenlit that second part. Thank God that he did. This was just such a jaw-dropping epic that the likes of which we rarely do see nowadays, but really is one of those movies where I think years from now we're going to look back and everyone's going to remember the first time that they saw it. The fact this film delivered as much as it did in terms of action, in terms of spectacle, in terms of world building. There's so many interesting themes in this movie, about heroism, but I think also about activism and things like that. I think all of that is so interesting. It's such a grand scale of a film, and like I said, it really did have the potential to disappoint us because of that, but the fact that it honestly surpassed those expectations, I think that's what makes Dune such a special experience. I cannot wait to see what part 2 really does entail, what really does unfold in that film. Hans Zimmer giving maybe the best score of his entire career, one that has not left my mind since I did see it. And if that second film is anywhere on the level of this, we could potentially be looking into one of the best franchises that we have had in a very long time. Everyone's been wanting to get that next Lord of the Rings, and I think we are starting to see that unfold when it comes to this film. I might be hyperbolic in saying that, and maybe part 2 ends up, not delivering in the way that we wanted to. Maybe it ends up underwhelming, but at least we have a really great part 1, and for me, I think that is enough to absolutely put it on this list. Similar to the last movie I talked about, Spider-Man No Way Home is another film that has such high expectations and could very much let us down, but this film very much delivered, but also did a lot of things different than I really was expecting, being a much more personal story for Peter Parker, who really is kind of put through the ringer in this movie, really getting to flesh out the idea of what happens when everyone knows who he is, but also how everyone is sort of divided throughout this. Some people siding with Spider-Man and seeing him as this hero, but also some people seeing him as this terrorist of sorts. It's such an interesting way to look at this character, but also kind of working as sort of the final chapter for him becoming the Spider-Man that we all know and love. Lots of surprise in this movie that I dare not spoil. I still will not spoil in this video, just because of the fact that there are probably still some people that haven't seen this movie, and I want to respect that as much as I can, but there are so many surprises that were just so amazing to behold within this film. The way they were able to take all of these villains and never really making the film feel like this clusterfuck that it very much could have been. Everything just kind of balancing so nicely, I think, is so well done, this movie. And the movie never really getting away from the Tom Holland Spider-Man. It still is always focused on him, even when we are focusing on other characters. The movie is still his story. The movie is still very much about him, and I think that's something that this movie just does such an amazing job with. Really just puts this character in such an interesting direction. I'm a fan. I've always been a fan of the Tom Holland Spider-Man because it has been something really different. They've taken this character in a lot of very interesting directions, but I think the place he ends this movie in, I have never been more excited for a Spider-Man movie than I am at the end of this movie. I can't wait to see what other things they have in store for this character. And if it is anywhere near on this level, I think we're in really good shape. I think Tom Holland is just absolutely incredible, this character, giving honestly the best performance of his career so far. I love what he was able to do in this film, the places that he was willing to take Peter. So many shocks in this movie that I really have not been able to stop thinking about. Spider-Man No Way Home is really just a film that is delivering at its potential, at its fullest potential in the way that you really wanted to, but also kind of ushering in this new side of Spider-Man that we really haven't gotten to see before, and also finding a way to cater to those legacy characters, but never feeling too focused on them, always keeping the focus on its titular character. I think it just did such an amazing job with all of that, and for me, definitely, it's one of the best films of 2021 for sure. The fact that we're still talking about it and things like that, positively or negatively, I think that alone is really amazing to see. The conversation has, continued to go and everything like that. I think it's just one of the best films of 2021. Licorice Pizza, I know, is a very controversial film for a lot of people. I know it's divided a lot of people, but I just can't help but feel enamored with just how joyful and breezy this movie really is. A film that really is about these two people in very different stages of life, seemingly. You have, Cooper Hoffman, who is 15 years old, and he's still a kid, and there's so much more life that he needs to experience, and he's constantly trying to act a lot older than he is. Then you have Alana Haim, who is fresh out of college, and she's kind of at a point where, she's always thought she needed to assume a career path, but she's kind of conflicted with what she really wants to do, and yet there's a lot of similarities between the two, and I think all of that is very interesting. The lifestyle that these two really do pursue, the different adventures that they go on, is something I just felt so drawn to in this movie, and I know a lot of people have said that it is a romance film. I really wouldn't categorize as that. It's much more about a romance of a feeling. It's more about falling in love with, both of each other's lifestyles and things like that, and really feeling drawn to each other because of that. And I think that's something that this movie did a really excellent job with. It also is just so hilarious to watch. There's so many just wacky hijinks that these characters get involved in that you just can't help but just laugh along with them for the ride. I mean, Bradley Cooper is just ridiculous in this movie. The cameo that he has here, the fact it's been able to make such an impact on everyone, and be one of the most memorable parts of this movie, even though he only has like 3 minutes of screen time, that alone shows just how funny this movie really is. But it also is the amazing work from both Cooper Hoffman and Alana Haim, two newcomers who both of which don't feel like newcomers very much at all. Alana Haim especially is just extraordinary here, has such presence, has such commitment to this film, such confidence, and really just feels like such a star in the making. I can't wait to see what both of them end up doing within their careers, but also just capturing the 70s era of just, feeling very freeing, kind of living in the moment. All of that is very interesting throughout this movie. I really love what this movie has to say about being an adult and sort of the idea of being okay with maybe not finding that career path, being okay with feeling a little directionless in life. I think this movie does a really excellent job with that. Overall, I can understand why it hasn't been for everyone, because it definitely is a lot more breezy than what Paul Thomas Anderson typically does, but I really do love how much he challenges himself in this movie to do something a lot more lighthearted, a lot less emotionally draining in that way. I think that's what really does make this film stick out as much as it does. And for me, I mean, again, I understand why people feel the way they do about this movie, but for me, I just couldn't help but fall in love with it, and easily is just one of the best experiences of any movie of last year for me. The Green Knight is another film that came out in the summer, and I feel like people just completely forgot about it. And it's very unfortunate, because I think this is one of the most interesting character studies of last year. I mean, you focus on this character that everyone is hyping up to be the next in line. He's supposed to be, he's supposed to inherit the throne, but the whole movie is sort of him coming to terms with, is he really worthy of that title or not? Is he really someone that deserves to be, that deserves to get the royal stature that he is assuming in that way? I think all of that is very interesting in this movie. Sir Gawain is not necessarily a good person. He has made a lot of choices in life that are very selfish. He's not really a noble guy, and I really like how this film struggles with the idea of nobility, with the idea of trust, and things like that. I think all of that is very interesting, and Dev Patel is just so good in this film, gives an Oscar-worthy performance in this movie, playing a Sir Gawain that is so deeply conflicted in this film, doesn't really know if he wants to go down this path or if he just wants to be a lot more independent and selfish and things like that. I think all of that is really well done here, but also just the production design of this movie alone is just so stunning to behold. The fact that so much of it was again used with practical effects is amazing in this movie. This being the most expensive independent movie ever financed, I'm pretty sure, very much does show why throughout many moments in this film. I think was just amazing to watch. Alicia Vikander being another huge star in this movie, playing a dual role and not even realizing that she was playing that dual role. I mean, really just speaks to her talent in this movie, really just does such an amazing job here. And again, the path that Sir Gawain goes down is one that's just so compelling to watch for me. It's a slow burn, but it really does pay off, culminating in one of the most impactful endings of last year that has not left my head since I've seen it. The Green Knight really is just a movie that we rarely get. It's a movie that is medieval, but it's not really concerned with a bunch of like swashbuckling action. Yes, it's in there, but it's very limited. This is much more a character study. This is much more a film about earning that title, earning those sort of things, and I think that's what makes this film so special. It's the places that David Leitch as a director is really willing to go, continuing to show why David Lowery is It's the places that David Lowery is willing to go, continuing to show why he is one of the best directors working today, especially with a movie like this. There's so many interesting themes throughout this movie. There's so much more that did for me than I really did expect it to. This is just such a special movie that a lot of people really did end up sleeping on, and it's very unfortunate, but for me, it is easily one of the best of last year. Now, The Power of the Dog, on the other hand, is a movie that you very much can't say was slept on. I mean, a lot of people are thinking this is the frontrunner to win Best Picture, or maybe not. I'm not really sure at this point, but regardless, this is just such a fantastic movie. The way this film covers the idea of toxic masculinity, but going a bit beyond that, diving into the idea of sort of, a very conflicted lifestyle, showcasing a character like Phil Burbank, who at first you can't really stand at all. He is so just demeaning in the way that he goes about things, and he's so barbaric in his nature, and then as the film goes on, starting to understand more of why he really is that way, why he is so hubristic, why he treats Cody Smith-McPhee's character in the way that he does. I mean, it is without a doubt Benedict Cumberbatch's best performance of his entire career. Everything he's able to do in this movie, he should 100% be the frontrunner to win Best Actor. I think he just absolutely knocked out of the park here. But Cody Smith-McPhee also, I'm very happy, has not been understated, because it's such a challenging performance for him, because this character comes across as so innocent and childlike, but we all know by the end of the movie is completely recontextualized, and I just really love what he was able to do in this film. And then Kirsten Dunst, someone who's like thrust into this volatile world and starting to self-destruct. I mean, there's so much to really love about this movie. Jane Campion's directing as well. The way she directs this film in such a patient manner, but still makes it so riveting and like has such a disturbing atmosphere throughout it. I think she just does such an amazing job with that here. I really love the layers of this movie, the places that it really does go, themes about like emotional repression and self-humiliation, kind of like being in conflict with oneself in a way where it's like you've gone down this path, but is this really who you actually are, or is this a different version of yourself? I think all of that is so interesting in this movie. So much great dialogue here. The banjo scene alone, you know what I'm talking about. The banjo scene, that alone is enough for reason to absolutely love the fuck out of this movie. The cinematography here is just so immersive. Everything about Power of the Dog, I mean, deserves all the praise that it's gotten. And I know, again, it's not gonna be a film for everyone because it is very much a slow burn, but for me, I just can't help but praise this film enough. I think this, for me, I would love for it to be the frontrunner for Best Picture. It's not the film that I would want to be the frontrunner for Best Picture, but it's definitely one of the best films nominated for Best Picture, and by all accounts is one of the best films of 2021. So, while I just said Power of the Dog isn't the film I would pick to be the frontrunner, this is, right here, Drive My Car. This film is just so special in every aspect. There's so many films that cover the subject of grief, but none of them really cover it, I think, in the nuanced manner that Drive My Car really does, because this movie isn't really about just grief on its own. It really is about how consuming grief can really be, and while it may not hit you externally, internally, the many many emotions that you're feeling, the ideas of guilt, the ideas of regrets, kind of, questioning why you're still alive. Why is this happen to, why are you still the person that's here, but the person that's been taken away from you, why did it end up that way? Are there different choices you could have made in life? I think all of that is so interesting, but also the way it really affects the way that we pursue art. I think this movie just does such an amazing job with that. And the idea of bonding through grief, with the characters of Yusuke and Misaki, who don't really like each other that much at first, how they start to gradually, like each other, how they start to, gravitate towards one another, the different tragedies that they've gone through in life. I just found all of that so deeply compelling in this movie. And Hidetoshi Nishijima's performance, is one that has been so overlooked, I feel like, in this movie. I see so many people talk about Drive My Car and how it's one of the best films of the entire year, but none of people recognize just how great his performance here, capturing these humanistic qualities of someone like Yusuke, but also so many subtle emotions. He just does such a incredible job with that throughout this entire film, and so many moments here just have me such a emotional wallop, but it's also such a patient and thoughtful film that I think is easily going to affect so many people in so many different ways. The chances that Ryusuke Rusuke Hamaguchi takes when it comes to this film, I think, is absolutely incredible here. The 40-minute prologue especially is just so wild to think about, that 40 minutes before the title comes on screen, but things like that I think really just make this film that much more worthwhile. I love how long it is. I love how much we're able to dive deep into the conflict that's going on here, but how much time we spend just as much time with the art that our main character is pursuing, because it matters just as much to him. I think it's just so incredible in this movie. The score is one that has been so overlooked. It's just a movie that the more I think about, the more I just really fall in love with everything it really is trying to go for. I think it's such a rewarding aspect of this film. Yes, it's very deliberately paced, but I really just love how naturalistic this film is and things like that. And there's just so much that I could get into in terms of themes and nuances and all that stuff. But it really is a film that I think is worth going into, knowing very little, like some films I've talked about in this video. I think it's very much worth going to that way. I just love how many chances it takes. I love how different it is from other films of this nature. It really is just the kind of experience that you're not really ready for, but I cannot understate enough just how powerful of a film Drive My Car really is. Without a doubt deserves all the praise it has gotten. For me, I wish this was the front runner for Best Picture. It very much should be, and it's just amazing to see the staying power that thankfully this film very much does have. It's a movie that I hope to God also never gets a remake, because I feel like so much valuable stuff would be chopped up if it was. But it really is just one of the most rewarding experiences of last year. Like I said before, I think this was easily one of the best years for musicals that we've really ever seen. Very much reinvigorated the love for, musicals that has kind of been gone for a little bit. And for me, while there have been a lot of great ones, none of them really were on the level of In the Heights for me. And this is a film that I feel like a lot of people really loved, and the hype really did start to die down after a while. And I don't know if that's due to how it didn't really perform well box office wise, or if there were just other films that, overshadowed it. But for me, just the love and just the passion that I have for this film has never really went away. In the Heights is a film that I think is destined to be a classic in pretty much every way. It's the kind of movie that I think we rarely get musical wise. This is a film that does such a great job of kind of being a reconstruction of the musical. It isn't really an adaptation. If anything, I would say it's more of a reimagining, because it takes these characters in such interesting sort of directions. This is already a really interesting story about success and dreams and things like that, but yet it's able to do so much more, focus more on issues that the Latinx community community are facing, whether it comes to gentrification, whether it comes to, racism and things like that. This movie really does such a great job of fleshing out all of these issues in such an interesting light, but also having such an amazing cast of actors here. Anthony Ramos really getting to show just how amazing of a leading man that he can really be, really just carrying this entire film. Melissa Barrera and Leslie Grace being great here too, but Olga Merediz really standing out as, I think, the clear lead, the clear standout of this entire movie. The impression that she's able to give as the character of Abuela just through Pacencia Yafé. It's just so amazing to watch, and it gets me every single time what they're able to do with that character in such a short time period. I thought they did such an amazing job with that, but the production especially of this film is just so fully on display here, cinematography-wise. The movie is such an interesting sort of visual look to it. There's so many musical numbers that they do so many interesting things with, and really does show what you can do with the parameters of cinema, what the parameters of cinema can do with a movie musical, how much it can benefit a movie musical. This movie really does understand that very well. I think of, things like Pacencia Fe, I think of the opening number, but especially when it comes to 96,000, just that scene alone, that's what really embodies just the spirit that I have when it comes to this movie, the genuine love that I have for this film. When it comes to musical films in 2021, yes, I'm going to remember things like Tick, Tick, Boom. Yes, I'm going to remember, West Side Story, but In the Heights, this is the one that I'm going to remember the most fondly. This is the one that I always feel the desire to rewatch the most. There's so many just amazing scenes from this film. I think that what this film has to say about family and community and things like that, I think those messages are universally ones that everyone is really going to, ones that everyone really can relate to in that way. And also just having such a satisfying and beautiful ending and making the necessary changes to the film that really does make it adaptable. Yes, there were some liberties that it took that I know some people weren't that fond with, but for me, I really just love everything this film ended up standing for. I think the spirit that everyone had for this film, the energy this movie had, really has just never really gone away. I know, especially knowing how long it took Lin-Manuel Miranda to make this movie a reality, the fact that it was able to come out in the way that it did is just absolutely incredible. Like I said, I know there are other films that really did kind of outshine it in some people's minds, but for me, nothing really was on the level of In the Heights for me. This will always be the defining musical film of 2021, and absolutely, I think, deserves to be number 2. And as much as I'm gushing about it, it still is not my favorite movie of 2021. There's just one film that hit me just a little bit more when it comes to this one, and I think you guys know what it might be at this point, just because I haven't really discussed it yet, and you guys know how much it impacted me, but that, of course, is... My God, where to even begin with a film like Mass? I mean, this is such a crushing, a devastating film that just elicited so many emotions out of me. But it's also such a impactful and humanistic drama about the idea of, the relationship between parents. And, it has so much to say about parenting and, morals and sort of like the different paths that we take in life. And does that really have an effect, on our kids, when eventually they end up going about pursuing what they do in this movie, is that something that the parents should take sole responsibility for? I think Mass just presents that so well. The fact that this entire movie is set in one fucking room the entire time, and yet I feel so riveted by every bit of dialogue that's going on, is really just a testament to how amazing this screenplay really is when it comes to the different perspectives in this movie, whether it be from the perpetrators of the incident or from the victims, the parents of the victims, of the incident. I think this movie just does such an amazing job with that. The performances, my God, are the most overlooked of the entire year. Ann Dowd should absolutely be the frontrunner for Best Supporting Actress right now. I don't know why she hasn't gotten more awards attention. Just the work that she does in this movie, in the climax especially, just really impacted me in a very profound manner. Jason Isaacs, Martha Plimpton, I mean, really all of these actors just being at the top of their game and showcasing, what they're able to do when they're given the kind of material that they're given in this movie, but it goes far beyond that. It's not just about the story of this film. It really is just the impact that this movie really did have on me, the rawness of this film, and the lengths that it goes to really showcase the grief that has consumed every single one of these individuals, and really showing how this has changed all of them, but also eventually connects them together. It's just so beautiful to watch. And the anger that these characters feel, it's something that you really can latch onto, but the eventual acceptance as well of what ended up happening and the way that they end up connecting through it is just so rewarding to watch. At points, this movie feels like a stage play because of how intimate it is, but you also just feel so drawn to all four of these characters and their very uniquely different perspectives within this situation. The fact that this is Fran Kranz's first film that he ended up directing is just so daring. There's so much fearlessness that he put into this. He in no way tries to undercut any of the drama that is going on here, and I think he just does such an amazing job with that in this movie, and just really focusing on the lingering effects that a school shooting can have on two different sets of parents, whether that be positive or negative, the different feelings that they felt, how some of them are taking blame for what's happened, how some of them are feeling completely guilty, like they could have done something to prevent it. All of that is just so powerful to behold here and spoke to me in such an interesting way that very few movies really do. I think the ideas that this movie goes for, it's just so impactful to watch. And yeah, it is a very hard watch. Is it a movie that I would watch like constantly? No, it's not a movie that I would find myself watching constantly. But when I really think about 2021 and the movie that hit me the most, and the movie that really made me feel like this is the film that nothing could potentially top this, in terms of just how much it affected me, how much this was a movie that I wanted to recommend to people as soon as it was over. Mass is really the one that comes to mind. The feeling that this movie left me with, the emotions that it elicited, all of that is just something that has never really left my head. I saw this movie all the way back in January of last year, have not rewatched it since, but thankfully I have been able to purchase the Blu-ray, and I've certainly wanted to since then, but in that time, I just really wish this was a movie that had a lot more recognition. I wish this movie was able to get the fan base that it really does deserve. It is not an easy watch. No, it's not, but it is the kind of movie that really just sticks with you and leaves an impact on you that you really are not ready for in terms of what it really is trying to go for. It goes far beyond just the conflict that these characters are really dealing with in this movie. It has so much to say about, identity, about, worldviews and things like that. I think all of that is so interesting when it comes to this film. Really, like I said, at the end of the day, when it comes to the movie that affected me the most, the movie that impacted me the most, and the one that I felt the most eager to recommend to other people, Mass is 100% that movie. This is the movie that I really wish would have gotten a proper theatrical release, because I would have absolutely loved to get to see us in theaters. But the fact that I was able to see this when I did, and the fact that I was able to eventually recommend this to other people and they love this movie as much as I did, that's really the power of cinema for me. That's really what cinema can do, the way it can impact people, the way they can also bond and connect us together. That's what makes Mass such a special film for me, with so many powerhouse performances and such a incredible message that absolutely is so heart-wrenching to think about, but also is one that I really have not been able to stop thinking about. And I promise the fact that both my best and my worst movie involve school shootings is purely coincidental. But honestly, it's kind of fitting, because I feel like Mass is just a perfect encapsulation of what a movie like this should be. It is very heart-wrenching. It is very hard to watch at points, but it is every bit as emotional and rewarding by the end of it. And it's just a film that has not been able to leave my head since I first watched it. That, for me, is absolutely what makes Mass the #1 best movie of 2021. Oh my god, we finally did it. We finally have made it to the end of this video. I know that, like I said, this video has been a long time coming, but I'm just very happy that I was able to finally get this done. It's such a fulfilling feeling that I'm finally gotten the best list of 2021. 2021 movies are behind me. I'm very happy to have finally said that. I'm sorry that this video took such a long time, but as always, this is always a lot of fun to do. I love getting to, reflect on the movies that affected me the most throughout the year. But Either way, guys, remember, that's it for this video. As always, comment down below, let me know what your best movies of 2021 are. Would love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Again, as always, thank you guys for sticking with me and watching all these, watching all these reviews in 2021. I know I wasn't that consistent last year in terms of uploads and things like that, but I really am trying to make up for it. And, getting this list done, I hope shows that I still very much do care. I still do try to pour as much passion as I can, into these videos, and I hope I was able to show that here. But either way, guys, for this video, hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.